you all have a really busy schedule. So we appreciate you taking the time, and we hope you get something really good out of today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about increasing operational efficiency through IT service management, or ITSM, and identity exploitation management, or IEM. And our goal is to show in clear, engaging terms how they align with business goals. So how to get the most out of today's webinar? Well, like I said, we've got a large audience today. We'll be peppering in today's webinar with some live poll questions. And when you answer them, you'll be able to see your results compared to other IT professionals in a variety of industries. We'll also have a QA at the end for any questions you might have for our panelists. And we'll be periodically posting a link in the Zoom chat if any of you would be interested in scheduling a discovery meeting to qualify for an IES, identity exploitation scan. And by the way, that's the same IES that we'll be talking about today that we did for GPA Global. And it helped them find vulnerabilities that they then use to tighten up security gaps. Also, one final note, don't worry about taking notes. We'll be sending you a link to the recording for this webinar after the end of it. So what's today's agenda look like? Well, we'll be getting into details about signs your company is ready for an ITSM and how to position and message those challenges to key stakeholders in your company. We'll go over what is an ITSM, an IEM practice, how they work, and what their benefits are. We'll also show in practical terms, in a real world case study, exactly how those would work and how they would benefit. We'll have that Q&A that I mentioned a moment ago, but also feel free to use the chat feature, or on your Zoom window in the center on the bottom, there should be a QA button. So you can use that QA button to ask questions throughout the webinar. And we'll be queuing them up at the end to answer those questions in order. And of course, like I said, you can schedule the discovery meeting at any time through the link we'll be posting. So let's get into some introductions. My name's Tetsu Noguchi. I'm the VP of Business Development here at 3GC Group, and I've been here about 14 or 15 years. The company's been around for over 2 decades. And along the way, we started another company, PandoBlocks, that has a managed data warehouse with some super cool AI features woven into it. And this year, we're really exciting because we're working to bridge the two companies together to offer a single cohesive operational service. So next up, we're very lucky and honored to have David Swisher, a 30-year veteran IT leader here from GPA Global. So David, do you want to say a few quick words?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tetsu. Really excited to participate in this conversation. Just real quick, a little bit about me. Yeah, as Tetsu said, over 30 years in IT. 8 years of that was in active duty Air Force. The rest of it's been in the civilian world, primarily working in the manufacturing space.
Awesome.
Tetsu.
Thanks a lot for that, David. I really look forward to kind of hearing the actual real world examples. And we also have George Stone, who heads up 3GC's IT operations side of the business and comes also from decades of experience establishing and maintaining IT operations for mid to large enterprises. George, do you want to say a few words?
Well, David being Air Force, I'm actually a former Marine. So in the IT operations side, I'm a control freak. Um, I've been helping organizations mature their IT operations for over 25 years for companies like Bank of America and Procter & Gamble and the W.R. Berkeley Corporation.
All right, very cool. So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot about your experiences establishing IT ops. So before we get into the meat of today's webinar, I just wanted to say a few quick words about 3GC. Some of our clients might be in the audience today, and we thank you so much for your business. And many of you may remember our earliest years as a value-added reseller and technology support services company. Now, we have evolved a lot since those early days, and today we're an IT MSP with a unique set of services that help companies transition from that more traditional fragmented technology approach to a continuously maturing IT operation. And we do that by offering both IT and digital operations consulting and support. We help build and manage cloud and SaaS infrastructures. And we provide an industry-first data service desk, which combines service management for data and support management and infrastructure for data in a single operational package. Just one more quick slide about 3GC. So over those last 20 years, we've been developing and working with some really great people in the industry. In that last decade, we started incorporating advanced technologies into our DevOps and DevSecOps services, including AI and machine learning. And by the way, we were doing that long before ChatGPT and DeepSeek, OpenAI and Copilot became buzzwords on everyone's minds. And we were able to do that because we brought in those CISOs and CIOs, CTOs, and digital officers early. And they helped integrate IT service management and data-centric services into a single combined MSP model. But we then took it a step further by also bringing in CEOs and CFOs and chief operating officers from various businesses into our advisory board and as consultants. We were able to take those advanced technology practices created by those technical leaders I mentioned a moment ago and figure out how to align them with our clients' business goals. And with all that today, we help companies transition towards a continuously maturing data, IT, and security practice without the need for expensive or dramatic changes to the way our clients do business every day. It's always been our goal to make enterprise solutions as painless as possible and easier to adopt for our clients. And with that, let's get into a few of our clients. This is a list of our clients, and some of these we've been working with for well over a decade. And over there on the right, you'll see GPA Global, who we'll be talking about today. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to George to talk a little bit about the state of IT today. George?
Yes. So today's IT reality, which is more like it's been happening for everybody all year. Everybody's stretched too thin, some critically. Everybody's budgets are getting smaller. Your ability to innovate is stalled, and you're basically just stuck keeping the lights on. David, you want to give some experience on this one?
Absolutely. Thanks, George. So, you know, at GPA, that, originally we were brought in to do a lot of innovation and drive technology, but over the past few years, that has really shifted to, hey guys, let's just keep the lights on. Let's reduce costs as much as we possibly can, and you know, keep the business moving, but don't be the big cost center, right? That a lot of organizations have to face. So yeah, I live it every day.
George, you want to get into what an ITSM is?
Well, it's basically a framework. I think of it as the foundation for everything, and you build upon it. You start at the foundation and try to build everything on top of it. Think of ITSM more as just the SM, service management.
Mhm.
Everybody's got incidents, whether it's HR or IT. Everybody's got requests. So technically speaking, the service management aspect of ITSM can be applied to the other departments within an organization. Sometimes it'll also help you enable you to spread the cost of tools and projects across the various departments. So this way here, IT's not just getting the one hit on the budget. That's it. You want to go to the next one?
Yep. So here we get into that first poll. So George, why don't you run us through this one?
Well, this
You,
poll is talking about service management as it's done today in your environment, and everybody does things differently. We'd like to understand what the trends are.
oh wow, so we're seeing the poll answers come in live.
That's
Wow,
cool.
Jira is huge.
Yeah, it is.
Got a lot of developers out there.
So it sounds like
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, we have a good percentage of people that don't really have an ITSM or are currently using spreadsheets for service management and ticketing.
Spreadsheets, emails, text messages. And typically, what I see with an organization that does that is it's hard to prioritize, what needs to be done first.
Got it. Understood. All right. Well, you know what? I think we're going to have to save this information. This is pretty interesting insight. We've got 27% nothing. We've got 31% Jira, which is the largest by far. Uh, and we've got 15% on Freshdesk, 12% on Zoho or Zendesk, and then we've got 15% on Spreadsheet. So this has been really great. Thanks a lot for that. And next up, George, do you want to lead this?
Yes, I will. Well, I am. It's definitely about security, but it's also about minimizing resources and spend. Um, I'm sure everybody's getting hit up with various tools and everything like that. The costs are rising, as well as the resources to run those. IEM at a high level, first, it's a lot of different tools. Um, it's looking for your data on the dark web. It is also checking the perimeter from the outside. And these are, avenues of attack that typically a lot of organizations don't look at, especially not on a regular basis. Tetsu, you want to provide some more insight into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the core components of identity exploitation management for us is a tool called the IES, the Identity Exploitation Scan. And this is an external scanning process. And what's key to it is we're using the exact same tools that modern day threat actors use. And they look at everything related to your domain from the outside, as George mentioned. What makes us special is when we provide that report to you, it is exactly the same results that a ransomware group or a threat actor will see when they run those same tools. So it shows you in clear, uncertain terms exactly where you should begin shoring up your security defenses. Generally, we're finding things that standard vulnerability assessments or pen tests don't find because we're focused on that lateral movement that threat actors and ransomware groups take. And so with that, why don't I go into the next poll, and I'll take this one. So let's find out just how much effort you're putting into cybersecurity today. So for a lot of companies, we see basic security, endpoint, firewall, maybe a little bit of MFA on, say, Google Workspace or Microsoft. As you sort of move up the chain, when you get into security services, now you're starting to look at some kind of 24/7 security. So maybe you've got a single sign-on like Okta. Maybe you're using Sentinel-1. Maybe you're doing some data security or database encryption. And right around here, we see most companies have a little bit of EDR. So something to look at those endpoints. And then as you move up, if you're in this space, you're really well on the road to a security practice, and that's full SIEM. Maybe you're using Red Canary or CrowdStrike. And then, of course, at the end, we've got large enterprise. So let's take a look and find out where everybody is in terms of their cybersecurity. Is that poll coming up for anybody else? Ah, there it
Oh, there
is.
we are.
Just popped up. There we go. There we go. Now I'm seeing some activity here.
Oh, wow. We've even got companies doing large enterprise. That is impressive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is breaking out a little bit surprising, but it's really great information. And we'll stop the poll in a moment and share it for everyone to see. But it looks like that mid-level companies sort of beginning that road into 24/7 security uh, is definitely the majority. Yeah.
You know, as a security guy at heart, I like to see that we're getting beyond just the basic hygiene of just the absolute minimum within organizations. That's a good indicator.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely a good sign that a lot of companies are recognizing the risks of moving to the cloud and establishing a certain level of security for it. Thanks a lot. That was really insightful. I really appreciate you guys answering the poll so quickly. All right. And with that, oh, do I need to hit the share results button? I'll hit the share results button. And with that, let me transition over to uh, why include IEM and Freshservice in a rollout. George, do you want to take this?
Sure. I mean, end state for everybody should probably be a single pane of glass. All your tools reporting into one console rather than having to log into a half dozen consoles just to find out what is going on in the environment. Um, Obviously, developing automation that ensures that if something does go bump in the middle of the night, you've got somebody putting eyes on it. That's it. You want to go to the next one? Thank you. Um, ITSM is really the foundation to ITIL. And like I said earlier, it's the foundation should be to everything. It's the foundation to ITIL as well as many of the other frameworks that are out there. It's a strategic, structured approach. This practice builds efficiencies and integrates well with other spaces, such as security, compliance, as well as financial. You add in monitoring and security. So if something does go bump, you've got eyes on it. Like I said earlier, I'm a control freak. If there is ever an issue with production, I want to know about it before the users and hopefully address it before the users start complaining.
You a
Um,
control freak? I'd never noticed.
how do we do all that? Well, we integrate monitoring and security tools into Freshservice. We automate the generation of tickets and prioritize incidents, and we cut out the noise. I've integrated ITAM for some organizations into the general ledger for depreciation purposes and real-time depreciation. In some cases, I built hardware refreshes, a schedule utilizing my ITAM database, and be able to project out to 5 years, which year I need how much for PC refreshes. Shall we
Very
move on?
cool. Yeah, so I'll take this one. So as I mentioned, we've been providing services, managed services for well over 20 years now. And in that time, we've supported something over 200 clients. And what we noticed was this huge gap in the market. On the one end, you see a lot of companies in traditional IT approaches, firewall, endpoint protection, and we see a lot of MSPs that are supporting that traditional style. And then on the other end, we see large enterprises with consultants focused on information systems integrated into IT operations models to meet ITIL or COBIT standards and policies. And on that end, you start seeing dedicated security teams that are completely segregated from IT teams and data teams. But there's this massive gap in between. And this is where we find a lot of companies they're either just starting on the road or struggling a little bit on the road to maturing an ITIL or COBIT driven operation. Now, separately from that, this is also the area where we start seeing companies that are struggling to figure out how to transition away from doing complex manual processes to a real change management maturity practice. We also see a lot of companies here working really hard to gain true visibility into their assets. And, a lot of companies will do their hardware assets well, or they'll do their SaaS subscriptions well, but doing all of it across the board from hardware, software, licenses, SaaS subscriptions, warranties, knowing amortization and getting ahead of hardware replacements ahead of time. Managing all of that is something that is a challenge for a lot of companies. We also see a lot of computers, and we saw this from the poll earlier. We see a lot of companies that are just getting into security risk modeling. So they're starting to look at 24/7 SaaS subscriptions to monitor their environment or even control their environment. It's like a Sentinel One or a Ninja One, those types of tools. And all of this leads to a DevOps and DevSecOps practice. Everybody's on the road to get there. The problem is most companies struggle throughout that journey because they either don't have all the resources, they haven't established all of the operational processes. Maybe there's some challenges with budget requirements and understanding where that money should go. And also finding all the expertise you need in the right roles to achieve a good cadence for a continuously improving DevOps and DevSecOps operation. So we noted this major gap in the market. And a lot of what we're talking today is the culmination of our effort to meet those needs for companies in that transition period. So with that, let's get into the third poll question. And I'll take this one. Uh, how much of your time is actually spent on keep the lights on IT? And another way to ask this question is, how much are you being held back because of KTLO from being able to now drive value enhancing and innovative initiatives? All right, so we're already seeing some questions coming in here, some answers coming in. Oh, that's an interesting spread. I wasn't really expecting that.
Same here. I'm a little surprised, right? But I mean, I see that people are still
Yeah, we're still
answering
seeing
it.
some more answers coming in.
I honestly, I had an expectation of just 100% is all, keep the lights on.
I I did too. It's really
Yeah.
interesting because when we talk to a lot of companies, the KTLO portion, people are just bombarded with tickets. They're spending, 20 hours a week just on tickets, and so they don't have time. But this is actually a really interesting spread. Yeah. Okay, so we're closing down the poll now, and we're starting to share. So it looks like there's definitely a few of you who are struggling because you're being bombarded by KTLO activities. And usually what we see there is basically just catching up to tickets. We're seeing a good number of you at the 75% of your time being on KTLO. And by the way, we see that very, very often. To me, that's the one that we see the most. So it's a bit of a challenge to start focusing on value enhancing and innovative initiatives. But what's surprising here is a good number of you are actually at that 50-50 mark. So you guys have some really big initiatives and projects that you're working on. I think my biggest surprise was the 25% mark. That was, I was not expecting to see any companies there. All right. So let's get into how IEM and ITSM can help. George, you've got a ton of experience working with this. So help break down some real world examples of how IEM and ITSM can help companies that are sort of working towards that journey to being a full ITIL COVID house.
Well, ideally, automate. Um, Automate the onboarding process. I remember recently meeting with a, CIO who actually gets involved with the onboarding process, and literally it takes days to get it right, to give all the access that's needed. And in other discussions with other organizations, a loss of productivity when the person gets onboarded. For like the first week, they can't do anything because they don't have access to everything they need. Offboarding. Typically, when I start taking a look at an organization's data, I look at the data hygiene, such as accounts that are still active or enabled rather, but haven't been active for over several years. Um, Now, alerting, um, with IEM, alerting on when outward-facing devices have new vulnerabilities. How often, is an organization looking at that stuff? As well as know when company accounts show up compromised on the dark web. So these are all things, if you can alert properly in automation, it'll definitely help your organization. Here's another poll. And ideally, what could be fixed today? What's your biggest problem?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Onboarding, offboarding. Not surprising.
Change
That's
management.
a really complex process. Ball often gets dropped there. Road mapping remediations. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, we definitely see that a fair bit. I'm surprised managing assets and subscriptions isn't higher.
So I think that goes along with the maturity level, right? And,
Yeah,
the
It,
hygiene,
it, it might be higher for the CFO.
right? Because they need to track that
yeah.
more closely.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to screenshot this one too. Save this one. All right, so let's move on. And I think now we can just very quickly show a few examples of some ITSM and IEM. So George?
Yeah. To go back to an earlier comment, being the control freak. A long time ago, I had a CIO tell me, "In God we trust. Everything else, show me the data." And I don't know how many times I say it to my teams. Again, KPIs, understanding where the weaknesses are. It could be technology, it could be resources, it could be users. Users as far as training goes, resources. And this goes back to that quote earlier. I was complaining I needed more resources. And the CIO was like, "Hey, show me the data." And I didn't have the data. Well, it took me several months, but I developed the data, and I probably tripled the size of my team because it was pretty alarming. Tetsu, you want to move on to the next slide?
Mhm.
Now, this slide here, this is software, this is hardware. You could slice and dice it many different ways. Ideally, this could be the start of an automated risk registry for security and tech debt. You want to talk tech debt? I was talking to somebody recently. I forgot what, I think it might have been an NT40 server running Exchange 5.5 and still in production.
2025, no less.
Yes,
Surprised it's still
and
running.
this was in the last month. I almost fell off my chair. But again, this is something I would identify in the reporting of IT asset management. You want to go on to the next one?
Mhm.
Now, one of the poll questions talked about workflows as well as onboarding and offboarding. This is a very simple workflow. They can get extremely complex, especially for GPA. No, I'm just joking. Um, Not really. I've got somebody on this call that would differ. But anyways, this is how it's designed. This is how the automation is designed. And you go from, let's say, Freshservice to Azure or Google Cloud or AWS. And there's a lot of actions that need to be done, both for onboarding, and then you do the reverse for the offboarding. And then you build out other workflows. So if a ticket gets opened up, you've got a global organization. Well, where should that ticket go to? At what level? Should it go over to Asia? Should it go over to Europe? Should it go to network? Should it go to security? Again, these are workflows that we typically build out for organizations. Next one.
Very cool. And I could take this one here. So These are just a couple of screenshots from a much longer IES report. And as I mentioned earlier, identity exploitation scan, or the IES report, is just one facet of identity exploitation management. In this example here, we're showing a number of tools being used to find risk data points. And here we see there's 33,000. We often see as much as 200,000 anomalies that we find from a broad range of scans. Now, some of these anomalies need further investigation, or they might be clear-cut vulnerabilities. And so you can tell that from that screenshot, the second one there. If we notice CVEs, we'll list them. And when we list them, you could jump after those CVEs immediately after receiving this kind of a report. Okay, so we just spent a bunch of time talking about challenges facing companies today, signs that a company needs an ITSM along with IEM integrations. But how effective are the practical applications of ITSM and IEM? So let's get into that real world example we've been talking about since the beginning. Now, GPA Global is a global packaging manufacturer, and they do high-end luxury packaging for products around the world, including many that you guys have probably heard of, JBL Audio and Sonos for music gear, beauty product brands like Estee Lauder and Rimmel, major distilleries like Johnnie Walker, Patron, Absolute Vodka, and Bacardi, and luxury brand products like Tom Dixon. And GPA Global has 33 offices today in 10 countries on 4 continents. And they continue to grow, very often organically, but just as often through acquisition. And acquisition, as you guys might imagine, can cause major challenges in achieving IT operational efficiencies. So with that, let me hand things over to the star of our show today, David Swisher, IT Director at GPA Global, to get into the challenges that GPA Global faced. David?
Right. Thanks, Tetsu. Appreciates the opportunity to share. Yeah. So one of the key things that Tetsu mentioned earlier is the journey, right? GPA has been on a journey uh, for quite a while to continue to grow and to grow as quickly as possible, right? That's where acquisitions come into play. Well, you know how it is when the acquisitions happen, you inherit. That's it. You inherit and you try to integrate, change where you can. But let me talk about some of the key things that really were the big things that we had to solve for. Was we had no help desk. You know, most of our help desk would have been drive-bys or somebody sending an email, you know, catching somebody in the hallway and saying, hey, something's not working, right? It just, there was no maturity, there was no tracking, there was no visibility, none of that. And IT was in that position of, you know, hey, IT is not good at what they do. Not that we're not good at what we do, we just don't have the right tools to be good, right? Uh, we had broken workflows, you know, everything from onboarding, offboarding. We'll talk about that here in a minute. You know, we had zero asset management. Um, Even from the CFO's perspective, they're asking IT saying, well, we see how much we spent. Where are we at on that journey, right? So these are real world things that I know that you face as well. You know, it is the reality of how most operationally IT operations get up and going, right? And then how do you scale that, right? How do you scale what's broken? You can't. So yeah, that's the real world things that we're trying to solve for at GPA.
Very cool.
That's it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. George, do you want to sort of
Oh
take
yeah, I'll
this
take
one?
that one.
Yeah.
I remember my first call with David and his boss, and one of the first questions I asked is, what are you doing for IT asset management?" And he looked at me with utmost honesty, and he's like, "We don't." And I think shortly thereafter, once getting engaged, he did. We were able to run scans across the entire global network and pull everything in, from printers to networks to endpoint devices, and start developing that risk registry of technical assets within the environment, as well as software inventory across every single device that was out there. Um, And I think the most fun I had with David's organization is the organizational change management, working with all the disparate teams across GPA Global. Everybody was doing things different. And I was helping to centralize everything and explaining to the different IT organizations what the benefits were behind that. It was a good challenge. David, you want to add to it?
I do. Working with the 3GC team really helped us to put this together, right? Because when I was brought on board, as George described, I had different cultures to deal with. I had different technologies to deal with. I had different opinions to deal with, right? And bringing in 3GC, it kind of helped to position, let's do things right as a group, as a team, let's get on board. And 3GC was really helpful in that because then I could work on change management. I could work on helping to share the vision and helping to gather the team together when I had 3GC to help me with, well, let's get that tool in place, right? Because as a director, I'm sure many of you can feel me, it's tough. It is a tough thing to be technical and to be the soft skills and drive innovation, drive, those types of things from a cultural perspective. There's just only so many hours in a day. And 3GC was instrumental in helping us get on that journey and be successful with it.
Very cool. It's awesome. So I'm going to go on to the next one, and this one, I'll sort of MC this one. So this is really the outcomes of the identity exploitation management effort. So David, we know that IES takes a look at your environment, your data, domain-based user credentials from the outside. Can you walk us through how the IES was able to provide real insight into GPA Global and provide actionable data to shore up your security?
Absolutely. So we have this application that we've been using. It's a homegrown application, and we wanted to grow it across our organization. Um, we thought everything was good until we found out it wasn't as good as we thought it was. We identified some critical vulnerabilities that we just had no idea, and the problem is that if you don't know, how do you know what to work on, right? And that's what this was able to do for us. It identified, said, "Hey guys, you've got a problem here that we had no idea." Like identifying some of these critical CVEs. I had VIP employees like CEO, right, that was using the same password for his Facebook and for Snapchat. Ah, these are critical things that had to be resolved. We wouldn't have known unless we engaged in this. Right? Makes sense. So Tetsu, yeah, that was amazing for it to be able to help us to identify some of our vulnerabilities.
It's funny that you mentioned the executives. I think 90% of the time when we run the IES, we find that the biggest culprits for email and credential risk is usually the CEO and the COO and the C-suite
It's not a lie.
executives.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Absolutely right. But that's where this came into. I could show, right? Instead of telling Mr. CEO, you really shouldn't use these same passwords, but I could actually show I have proof, Mr. CEO, you're using the same password, right?
Yeah,
Data.
absolutely. All right, so this is, I think, the final slide, and I think I'd like to spend the most time here, and then after this, we'll get into the Q&A section. But really, what I wanted to show here with David's help is when you implement a full-on ITSM with an integrated identity exploitation management practice, what are the real benefits and results that you get? So, David, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. So yeah, as you see, I'm not going to read through every one of these bullets, but it was critical. What we did, we were able to get our, when I said we have no ITAM, which is a true statement, George. I remember that conversation very vividly. We went from having nothing to now having almost all of it. Now, yeah, there's still some things we need to do, right? It's a journey, right? That's the one critical thing. Guys, this isn't a sprint. This isn't something that you need to rush into. It's a journey, and each one of the things that you need to solve for is its own, let's call it a truck stop, right? So we went from having nothing to having almost our entire environment visible. We know what we have, we know where it is, we know who's using it, we know how now we know how they should be using it, right? And be able to put controls in place to mitigate any kind of risk. You One of the big things is we are we are critically lean, right? And that's something George mentioned earlier. Is that most of my conversations with the ownership of GPA is I need more resources, and here now is the data to support that. And here's where I need it across the world, right? Mentioned earlier, we are a global company. We're from China all across Europe, bookending the US and into Mexico. So we're virtually everywhere. So I had to get the right resources in the right places. But without the visibility, I couldn't prove it. It was just my gut, right? And let's be honest, most CEOs, CFOs, they may like you and they're proud to have you on their team, but your gut feeling doesn't move the needle. You need the data. You need the data. So we were able to do things like taking some of these critical things that we have within our organization across the board and streamline them using automation. Let me first talk about onboarding, offboarding. Saw that in the poll, right? It's the entry point for IT and it's the exit point for IT. Of course, there's an entire life cycle in between. But these are the critical things. The first impression you give a new employee, what do they remember? They remember the onboarding process, right? And if you can't get them, let's say, a laptop for 2 days, or maybe their user account, their email isn't ready the first day that they start, maybe it's halfway through the day, what do you expect that impression to be on that new employee, right? You got a new teammate join the team, they're like, wow, this IT team is slow, right? This is what this does for you. So doing those types of things that is part of the hygiene, right? And hygiene for everybody is just a little bit different. But being able to have the foundation, be able to have visibility, have the data. And the one other thing I really want to touch on is that we are regulated, right? Not like the financial industry or anything like that, but more from GDPR, CCPRA, those types of compliances are critical. When I'm going through those audits, I can't just give them gut feel, right? I
Right.
have to show data. I have to show we're doing the right things for the right reasons and everything pieces together. So these are the things we were able to do. And again, it didn't happen overnight. George, we've been working on this, what, about 18 months, almost 2 years, and we're still
Yeah.
on our journey. The journey is not done, right? But we're at least to a point where we're keeping all four wheels on the road, right? We're not creating situations for new employees that are like, oh my gosh, this GPA company, they can't even get me a computer. What could I expect my life to be like here? We've solved that, right? We're on top of these things. And a lot of it has to do with what we did with 3GC. We wouldn't have been able to do that on our own because we're so busy keeping the lights on. That's the reality, right? I wish I could be 50-50. Man, it was amazing to see the result.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
GPA could be there. I would say we're more at the 75-25, 75 keeping the lights on, 25 working on driving technology innovations, optimizing processes, those types of things. Again, we're a big global company. Takes a little bit longer to pivot and move things and get the needle to move in the right direction. So
Awesome.
Now,
yeah,
and something to build upon that is the fact that GPA Global is a global organization with various IT teams in different parts of the globe that were doing things their way, not a centralized way. And during that 2 years, you also had mergers and
did
acquisitions.
yeah.
So, and this goes back to, for an organization that does go through mergers and acquisitions, having that foundation, you
Mhm.
bring on somebody net new, it's easy. Once your foundation is in place, it's easier to adopt. Whereas having just a mess on both sides of the acquisition, is just going to take longer.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Tetsu, back to you.
Awesome. So that sort of wraps up the core of what we wanted to talk about today. And I thought the case study was really great because we got into some real practical issues, concerns, challenges, and solutions. So let's get into some questions.
So just a couple of things I want to also mention in regards to 3GC and that engagement. Again, being a global company, we have different cultures, we have different languages that are spoken, and all those things like that. George and his team was very um, open to having like phone calls early in the morning with maybe my Europe team, later
Hmm.
in the afternoons or even early evenings to catch my China team. So just wanted to add that in there as well of just how well 3GC snapped in as a partner and really helped us to drive this through. Because with mentioned again, I'll mention it again, is that without their help, I'd still be stalled. I'd probably be downloading Spiceworks or trying to do something just to make it work. So I can't uh, I can't say enough about how well 3GC did with this project and
Thank
continuing
you.
projects, other projects that we're working on.
So one of the questions that we do often get asked is how manageable are the costs and fees when you're working with a company like 3GC to be able to get ahead of things and get some really good ROI? What kind of costs and fees were you sort of looking at? And of course, understanding that this was specific to GPA Global and every company's different, of course, but.
Yeah, yes, of course. So, the one thing about Fresh Service, first, let me start with Fresh Service just because that's an easy one to handle straight away. It's all based on the agent cost. And the beauty of Fresh Service is that it's not priced like the Cadillacs of the ServiceNows and all those. Although ServiceNow, I've used it, it's an amazing tool, but the cost doesn't fit. So Fresh Service from that side, it's a very affordable solution, right? And it's easy to manage. From 3GC side, 3GC side, we based everything by projects, right? So we had specific milestones that we were trying to build towards. As an example, we said, okay, we want to start with the US. Let's prove this, right? I'm sorry, actually, let me rephrase that. We actually used our Poland team because they were the most mature in that process.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, I
so
remember
we had
that.
Poland.
Yeah.
Yes, we had lots and lots of phone calls. So we started on Poland. So we did things in chunks. Again, a journey, not a sprint. So we did it in chunks. So it kept our costs small, right? It wasn't like we didn't create a budget, you know, to do the entire thing. We had forecasts, but we looked at, let's solve this problem. Let's prove it. And it made it much more palatable for the business, right? Instead of spending $100,000, just throwing a number, it's not really what it cost. Uh, but throwing $100,000 into a budget and say, okay, that's what we're going to use, we did in small, sizable
Mhm.
chunks. And the business appreciated that. And then we could show as we went through the journey, we could show as we went through, the costs actually reduced,
Mhm.
right? Because with us accomplishing as what we did, we were able to rinse and repeat. And we being GPA, we developed the the skills and the um, the understanding of how to use the tool so that we could take this on our own. Again, we're a lean team, so there's only so much that we can do. Did that help
Yeah,
answer
so
that
that's
question for you, Tetsu?
yeah, no, that's a really good one. And actually there's another question that we've had in the past before that I'd love to sort of bring up here. Very often we have seen other MSPs provide a lot of the solution implementation and they provide the support. But what they don't provide is sort of the training that's required beyond the IT team to the end users so that everybody's really aware of how those new tools work and can adopt them more easily. Can you talk a little bit about how 3GC sort of helped with that?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. You know, nothing against MSPs, MSSPs. They're there to make a profit just like everybody else, but they like to get you on that hook and keep you on that hook. So they'll only give you enough to be to, I don't want to call it being dangerous, but to be operational, but not really be skillful. There's a big difference in that. And where 3GC, they look at it as like, wait a minute, we're here to help you implement, but we want to make you skillful as much as you're willing to be skillful, right? So 3GC took the time to take us through that process and explain, why are we configuring it this way? When you get underneath the hood, sometimes, us IT people, we love to figure out how things work, right? That's just our nature. So instead of us just going out there and trying to figure it out, 3GC said, no, let us show you how it's done. And they took that time. And today our team operates it just like they operate every other tool in our space. So now we go back to 3GC when we want to continue to elevate our practice as we get more mature in using it and start to figure out, okay, the way we set this up, we need to make some subtle tweaks to be able to continue to advance this. Yeah, 3GC was amazing.
Very cool.
You
So
you bring
I
up a
got,
good point, actually, in thinking
Mm,
about it. I worked for another organization and we had PwC
mm.
do some work for us.
Oh
They
yeah.
would come in, do the work. They wouldn't train anybody. And then they'd leave. And then if something went wrong, we were forced to bring them back in, which was not
Yes.
cheap. And,
No.
and so when I worked with your organization, I knew I was going to walk away. I wanted to make sure that your organization could do what I just did.
And absolutely. Absolutely. And we're so very grateful for that.
Thank you.
so I actually have one, and we're coming up at 9:56, so we're getting close to closing this out. But I actually have one question for George. Um, you know, one of the ways that 3GC focuses on keeping the cost down is by only using the experts we need when we need them and making it as fractional as possible. Can you explain a little bit, George, on what your process was like, specifically for GPA Global, on how we were able to provide some of that expertise while keeping those costs manageable? And of course, doing projects in smaller chunks.
Um, well, I'll be honest. I know I'm not cheap. I tried minimizing my involvement in these projects, just to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Things are, definitely getting done. And I had additional staff. I've got an amazing platform developer. She works miracles, and she's the one that did most of the work. I only came in for the meetings and again, just to make sure things are on track. I've seen other engagements by other organizations where, they bill for a ton of hours and, most of it is management, not actual work. And I try to do the reverse of that.
Very cool. Yeah, and that is, just sort of as we close this one out, just sort of a final statement. As I said earlier, our goal is always to make enterprise solutions as painless and easy to adopt as possible. And that really centers around two additional themes beyond just doing the work, supporting it, and making sure that infrastructure stays up. And that's really sort of what we were talking about today here at this tail end, this question section is one, we don't want to bombard our clients with a lot of expertise and a lot of resources that our clients don't need. So we're going to put in a lot of thought into what experts you need when. And that sort of fractional set of service operation allows us to keep the cost very low. And then the other thing that David talked about that we also like to focus on very much is we know every company, regardless of your size, you have to manage your budgets. And managing budgets and letting things get out of control and balloon is something that can happen really easily. I mean, we see this every day with SaaS licenses. You keep sort of adding SaaS licenses as you need more people, and you don't have a process to retire SaaS licenses. And so eventually you're spending 30, 40, $50,000 a month on your SaaS subscriptions, and you're only using about 30, 40% of those licenses. And so we understand that struggle and that challenge. And so we do focus very much on creating smaller projects that are bite-sized and easy to manage. And each one of those projects acts as a stepping stone to do more and more and more. And throughout that process, we focus on training teams as well to the level that you're interested in learning, so that as much as possible, you can take on a lot of those operational tasks without relying on us to have to do them and having that outlay cost. All right, so I think that's, oh, sorry.
Just to build on top of that, one of the additional things to that is the smaller projects, enabling to identify a return on investment sooner
Mhm.
rather
Yeah.
than, hey, we're going to do a 1 year project. You're not going to see an ROI for 3 years out. It's smaller. You'll get a faster return, and your leadership will appreciate that.
Absolutely. Agreed.
All right. Well, thank you very much, David, for joining. We are incredibly lucky and honored that you were willing to join and share a lot of those insights. And George, as always, thank you for taking the time. As our ITOS director, I know that you're both very, very busy, so appreciate you taking the time. And with
Thank
that,
you.
I'll close this meeting out. And as I said earlier, we will be sending a link to this recording to all of you who are on the call today, and feel free to schedule a discovery call. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Amazing.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.